Hey, good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The New York Times headline here in the last hour or so. After Trump broadside, surveillance bill collapses in the House. This is the most head-spinning lead I'm going to read all day. Lead sentence here. Right-wing House Republicans on Wednesday blocked legislation to extend an expiring warrantless surveillance law that national security officials call crucial to gathering intelligence and fighting terrorism, dealing Speaker Mike Johnson a stinging defeat after former President Donald J. Trump urged lawmakers to kill the bill. I'm sorry. Okay, so these guys are crazy right-wingers because they don't want Americans to be spied on without a warrant, and Donald Trump was on the side of not spying on Americans, and so he's crazy. What is happening here? All right, let's suss it out a bit. Congressman Matt Rosendale joins us now. He represents Montana's 2nd Congressional District. He's very involved in these debates. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
Vince, I heard you needed a shot of energy, so I haven't been on for a while. I figured I would perk you up.
Well, thank you for that. I really do. So, what the hell is going on on Capitol Hill today? You know, I remember in December, I believe we talked about this. In December, we were talking about, okay, are they going to keep kicking the can? Are they going to keep allowing the government to spy on American citizens without any warrant whatsoever? And the can was kicked until April. Speaker Johnson was like, all right, let's kick the can to April. We'll deal with it then. Well, it's April. We're dealing with it now, and it certainly looks like we're about to keep allowing the federal government to do the same thing.
What could possibly go wrong with allowing the federal government to have warrantless surveillance on American citizens? Right? There's absolutely – the FBI – admitted to nearly 300,000 violations of conducting surveillance on American citizens without warrants.
And that includes January 6th attendees and Black Lives Matter protesters, right?
It's terrible. Yes, it includes. We don't know who all it includes. This is the problem, and so there's a group of us that believe in the Fourth Amendment, that believe that the federal government shouldn't be conducting these surveillance tactics on you without a warrant, as per the Constitution, and we're trying to make sure that if they're going to reauthorize FISA, which, by the way, that stands for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that it does not throw a wide enough net to include American citizens as well. If you're going to conduct surveillance on foreigners or foreign organizations, that you should not be able to just scoop up American citizens in this dragnet. And the federal government has been abusing this law. They've been violating this law for far too long. And so we're standing up and saying this is enough.
Okay.
The bill that they tried to push through today, this was just the rule. It actually wasn't the bill itself. So there's a little bit of a difference. It wasn't the bill. It was just trying to bring that bill forward on the floor. But it expanded the ability for the federal government to conduct even more surveillance, because what it did, Vince, was included additional businesses and industries that they were allowed to probe and extract that information from without having a warrant.
Wait a second. So, but the way that the Intel Committee and the way that Speaker Johnson sold this is that the bill was actually a way to improve FISA to protect Americans. This is what they're saying. They said there were 56 reforms built into this bill today. They call the bill RISA, R-I-S-A-A. It's backed by Ohio Representative Mike Turner in the Intelligence Committee. And this is the one that speaks.
The same Mike Turner that drummed up this false red flag scenario a couple of weeks ago, saying that the Russians were, staging nuclear weapons in outer space just so he could forestall this whole process from moving forward until he could whip enough support to make sure that they had the Intel version move forward instead of the Judiciary Committee version moved forward that included warrants and required warrants when you were conducting surveillance on American citizens, and also prohibited, the federal government from purchasing data from Amazon or any other company, thereby going around the surveillance laws.
Yes. So you're telling me that this bill, if it had been allowed to go forward today, would have actually expanded the government's spying powers?
That's exactly right. It would have expanded the government's spying powers.
This is infuriating, honestly. So why is it that you
voted against it? You're daggone right. I voted.
You voted against it. You are one of 19 Republicans today to vote against it. And the reason it collapsed was because all of the Democrats voted against it as well. But I think the reason the Democrats voted against it, I think because the bill also condemned Biden's border policies, right?
Yeah. What they did is this is another one of these Mickey Mouse deals where they brought a rule forward, and this rule was to conduct the debate, the discussion on two resolutions: one on the southern border, condemning what's going on there; one about supporting Israel; another actual piece of legislation that would have granted the Coast Guard further expansion of their ability to conduct their patrols out to 24 miles instead of 12 miles off the coast. And then it also included this FISA. No rule should be brought forward that puts all these things together in one package anyway.
So the Democrats voted it down because they didn't want to condemn Biden's border policies, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So there's and whose decision was it to bundle all of those things together? Was that Speaker Johnson?
At the end of the day, that's Speaker Johnson's call.
So Speaker Johnson, it sounds like he kind of wanted this bill to die anyway. He knew Democrats weren't going to vote for it.
Well, he probably knew that the Democrats were not going to vote for that. I have to agree with you there.
Huh.
And now comes the discussion about what will be brought forward. Are they going to conduct affairs properly, the way that we're supposed to have legislation brought forward, and that is to debate and discuss and amend the judiciary version of the FISA reauthorization out in public view, so that we can actually protect American citizens from being surveilled and protect American citizens from being attacked.
Well, that's what we're entitled to.
The purpose of that bill.
That's what we expect. That's what Americans expect, and of course, that's not what Congress is doing. Let me quote from Speaker Johnson today. I have a quote for you on where we go next. He said, quote, "I want to be clear about what happens if we fail this week. The Senate is prepared to move a clean extension of FISA, and if the House does not pass our bill, we will be forced to accept it next week because we cannot allow this vital national security tool to go dark." So what Speaker Johnson is announcing is that apparently based on the failure today of this bill to pass, that now we, the American people and the United States House of Representatives, just needs to accept the Senate bill next week, which just gives a clean extension to FISA, which is routinely used to abuse the rights of American citizens. Do I understand that correctly?
So here's 2 points that I will make. Number one, that when all of these minibuses were just granted, FISA was automatically extended through the end of this year. So it does not expire on April 19th. It is extended through the end of this year. Point number one. Point number two, if they actually did reauthorize it as it stands now, it would still be better than what they were proposing, which, again, expanded the federal government's authority to gather information from several other businesses and industries that they currently cannot.
The New York Times cited this. I just want to quote Donald Trump directly today. He wrote on Truth Social, "Kill FISA. It was illegally used against me and many others. They spied on my campaign." He's correct about that. They did spy on his campaign.
He's correct about that. Yep.
What do we do about this, Congressman Rosendale? I know that Marjorie Taylor Greene has presented this motion to vacate that she has sort of hanging over Speaker Johnson. Something of note, she met, I believe, for about 90 minutes today with Speaker Johnson. He was quite obviously looking to suck up to her. He said he wanted her to join his, quote, kitchen cabinet so that she could be some sort of advisor to him. Additionally, we see reports now that Mike Johnson is set to do a joint press conference of some kind with Donald Trump on Friday where they're going to talk about election integrity. He very clearly is at this moment trying to maneuver to keep the base, basically to have the base keep him in their good graces. What do we do about all of this, Congressman?
Again, to me, I always say that we should be taking this legislation. It should go back to the committee. The committee should be able to bring forward what they had already recommended, what they had already passed at like 35-2. That's about as bipartisan as you can get, and bring that piece of legislation out of judiciary and bring it to the floor. And then if people want to try and strip out provisions, if they want to strip out a provision that says that you have to have a warrant before you can conduct surveillance on an American citizen, propose that on the floor. Let's see how many votes that you can get for that. If they want to propose an amendment to strip out the provision that says that you cannot, the federal government cannot go to, our intel community cannot go to Amazon or Facebook or whoever and buy lists and information and thereby getting around the warrantless search requirements. Let them try and bring those provisions and amendments forward on the floor. Let's discuss them. Let's debate them in the light of day. You know, that is the best disinfectant, the light of day. And see if those amendments can be stripped out to weaken the FISA legislation so that it allows the federal government to conduct additional surveillance on American citizens. I don't think the American people are going to support that. And I don't think that it would pass on the floor in the light of day.
So, again, Congressman Rosendale, there was a better bill, right? There's a Judiciary Committee bill that was designed to protect American citizens, right? And that, I believe that was led by Jim Jordan, correct?
It was led by Jim Jordan and Andy Biggs. Andy Biggs has been working on this for years, and it would have protected the American citizens from illegal surveillance by the federal government, and it would have protected the American citizens from attacks from terrorists. It would have accomplished both things.
I know you can't speak for any other congressman's particular vote, but why wasn't Congressman Jim Jordan among you today? There were 19 Republicans who voted against this scam today. Why wasn't Jordan among them?
There is a reluctance amongst the Republican conference to vote against a rule. Sometimes they'll vote against a bill, they'll vote against legislation, but they won't vote against the rule that actually conducts the control or the presentation of that bill as it comes out to the floor. And I don't understand why.
19 Republicans, and my guest, Congressman Matt Rosendale, among them. What are the chances? You're talking about it now, but before we let you go, what are the chances that we have a positive outcome here? This looks bleak, I have to admit. What are our chances of reining in the federal government at all when it comes to spying on American citizens?
Again, if they reauthorize FISA as it stands today, it would still be better than what they were proposing that expanded the ability for the intel community to go into several other businesses and industries and demand information without any kind of a warrant whatsoever.
Settling for the atrocity. Settling for the atrocity doesn't feel like a good deal. All I can ask is that people who care about this should call your congressman. Just light up the Capitol Hill switchboard today, because now's our time. Now's our chance. Congressman Matt Rosendale, thank you for the insight on what's happening there on Capitol Hill. Thank you, sir. Good to talk to you as always.
Thank you so much, Vince. Appreciate it.
To the phones we go. Line 1 is where Denise is calling in from Bethesda. Denise, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hi, Vince. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, ma'am.
I was trying to find out if you'd ever heard back from USAA about debanking the defense attorney for Trump. Did they ever respond to you?
I'm so glad you asked this question. Now, the reason I haven't offered an update on this is because I'm going to hopefully have a full-blown news update on that subject soon. I have one of the few luxuries in all of talk radio is that as a radio host, I also have a newsroom because I'm an editor at the Daily Caller, and that's the kind of story that leapt off the page for me, and I've since sicked the journalists at the Daily Caller on this very question, so hopefully we can get you a full-blown answer on it. But here's where we'll start. On Friday, we had Josh Hammer from Newsweek on, and we talked to him, and he's the one who brought this to my attention. He said that USAA, traditionally known as the military insurance company, had debanked John Eastman alongside Bank of America, and that definitely caught my attention. So what we decided to do was reach out to USAA on Friday. We went through their typical communication line where, a radio station reaching out, seeking a request for comment. They refused to answer. They did not send an answer back to us on Friday. So at the beginning of the week, we sought comment again, and once again received no answer. Now, one other piece for the public information on this. Eastman's own family said it in a column for The Blaze recently that he was debanked by USAA. They have not issued any corrections to that claim. John Eastman himself hasn't come out and said, oh, no, you got that wrong. So as it stands now, our understanding is that, yes, he was debanked by both Bank of America and USAA. And now we are, again, awaiting some more information. And as soon as I have it, my plan is to share it with you, Denise, and the audience here at WMAL. So thank you for asking for an update there. Isn't that wild?
It is crazy. I'm a USAA member, and we can't do much about government overreach at the citizen level, but we sure can over service providers.
Yeah, big time. Big time. Yeah, you know what? They can fix this right up. Give him back his account. Say it was a mistake. He should have never been debanked. But I don't know. Maybe their whole thing is like, it's time to be Bud Light. I don't know why you would choose that route. Thanks, Denise. I appreciate the call. Important topic. It's crazy out there. It's crazy out there. More from you and all the news of the day ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, good afternoon to you. 5:35 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yesterday, we were playing some of the audio and discussing the essay in the Free Press by an NPR senior journalist. He's been there for a quarter century at NPR, by the name of Uri Berliner, a whistleblower. That's the easiest way to describe him, but he's just saying, yeah, NPR is like a totally corrupt place. It used to be that we would play bird noises on the air. Now all we do is anti-Trump agitprop, and it's crazy. It's totally crazy, and he kind of wishes it was like the good old days. He kind of describes himself as a traditional lefty hippie, but he was stunned by how they just took the wrong path on so many important stories over the past few years, because that's how much they hated Trump. Everything from COVID and its origins and reflexively trusting Fauci to buying into anything that came out of Adam Schiff's mouth. It's been a complete disaster. And every time each of those stories has completely collapsed, when most normal people would, take an inventory and take a look at themselves and go, man, we really screwed that up. How can we fix it for the future? NPR just soldiered on, using American taxpayer dollars to continue to attack Trump and the people who would dare support him, and then frame everything through the lens of the neo-Marxists who currently run everything. It's about intersectionality and race and gender and da-da-da-da. It's like the craziest stuff. The craziest stuff. In fact, NPR became a source of just comedy. Like, to the extent that you would tune into it at all, you might just flip it on to be like, what's the most hilarious, ridiculous thing that anyone could possibly say today? Let's check in with NPR, because that's where you're going to hear it. So in the crazy time we live, a former CNN host by the name of Chris Cuomo is now a host on a cable network called News Nation. And last night, he had Uri Berliner stop by to talk about his experience at NPR over the last quarter century. Just setting up the audio for you. Here is Uri last night.
Colleagues came forward to do what you had to expect they were going to do, which is say, we disagree. Uri's entitled to his opinion, but we disagree about the nature and quality of our reporting. What do you make of their response? What do you make of the attention?
I'm not surprised by the response that, came from management and the same managers that I've been making a lot of these points about. And they're certainly entitled to that perspective. I will say I've had a lot of support from colleagues, and many of them unexpected, who say they agree with me. Some of them say this confidentially, but I think there's been a lot of response saying, look, these are things that need to be addressed. We haven't. We've been too reluctant, too frightened, too timid to deal with these things. And I think that this is the right opportunity to bring it all out in the open.
All right. So he's being nice to them about this, but he is talking about how, to the extent that NPR responded at all yesterday, the other people who work there. And remember, he works there now. So the other people who responded, some of the top executives, They were coming out going, no, everything is fine. And just to be clear, that's literally, I think I'm summarizing about as accurately as you can their entire response. No, everything is fine. They didn't go line by line. They didn't go detail by detail. They didn't rebut the individual claims. They didn't talk about the Fauci stuff. It was none of that. It was literally just, That was kind of the response here. In fact, let me quote from NPR's own website. NPR defends its journalism after senior editor says it has lost the public's trust. Byline David Folkenflik. NPR's chief news executive, Edith Chepin, wrote in a memo to staff Tuesday afternoon that she and the news leadership team strongly reject Berliner's assessment. Quote, we're proud to stand behind the exceptional work that our desks and shows do to cover a wide range of challenging stories, she wrote. She probably said it in a much softer voice. We believe that inclusion among our staff with our sourcing and in our overall coverage is critical to telling the nuanced stories of this country and our world. Let me pause for a moment and talk about what they mean by, what is that phrase they're using? Inclusion. Inclusion among our staff and with our sourcing. Uri Berliner, the veteran, the whistleblower here, he described this week that one of the things that NPR does is every source they talk to, they write down their gender, their race, and their ethnicity, and they keep track of it in an internal database at NPR. Just think of this. So a bridge collapse occurs, and you're trying to do a news story on it, and you reach out to first responders and local officials. And as you're doing it, you're like, sir, before you tell me anything about the dire state of the bridge collapse, would you please lead with your race and ethnicity? So I just need to jot this down for my notes. What? How insane is that? You're going to reach out to the sheriff and then write down his race and ethnicity. A local store owner, you got to write down their race and ethnicity. This is nuts. This is lunacy. But they wanted racial prejudice built into the way that they conducted their jobs. They have to. That's the virtue that leads them. Obsessing over the race of the people they're speaking with. That's insane. So here's NPR defending it. They're just like, oh, well, we think it makes our stories better. No, it turns out it doesn't. I've actually seen the work product. It's awful. Get rid of the racial prejudice. It's not helping anything. She added, quote, none of our work is above scrutiny or critique. We must have vigorous discussions in the newsroom about how we serve the public as a whole. Oh, you see that little sleight of hand? In the newsroom. You keep this fight inside. You don't say it somewhere else. He says he's been trying for years to bring this up, and he just keeps getting ignored. He was trying to have meetings with senior leadership. He's like, hey, you know that whole diversity thing that we say we're for? We don't really have diversity. Shut up. And they shut the door. They're like, sorry, there's no time for a meeting. Maybe next millennium. Maybe, yeah, we'll eventually get around to it. So they don't. So that's wild. And then among the other things, that's worth dwelling on here is that he pointed out in his essay that they knew that the Hunter Biden laptop was a totally legit story in the 2020 election. And you remember what the NPR public editor said at the time, a guy called Terrence Samuels? Or at least Terrence Samuels gave the statement to the public editor. He's NPR's managing editor for news. He said at the time, this was October 22nd, 2020, quote, we don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories. And we don't want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions. That was their public statement on the issue, pretending like it was a fake, nonsensical story. It was like, it was like talking too much about how Sheila Jackson Lee thinks the moon is made of gas. It's like, it's just a silly story. We're not wasting our readers' time on that. Which, by the way, the Sheila Jackson Lee story is a great story. In fact, Corey, can we submit my segment on Sheila Jackson Lee earlier this week for all of the available awards? I feel like that was excellent. Thank you. Okay, I'm getting nods and thumbs up. So we're going to do that. So we are now officially award nominees for our Sheila Jackson Lee coverage this week. So they said they don't want to waste our listeners' time and our readers' time. They're just pure distractions, this Hunter Biden story. This whole thing, these allegations about the Biden family selling out the country, being totally corrupt, enriching themselves at the expense of the American public. They're just distractions. We can't talk about this story. And what the whistleblower said this week is they knew internally that this story was legit and that it would hurt Biden electorally, and that's why they didn't do it. He said he had a senior journalist tell him, oh, boy, I'm glad we're not covering this because it's not good for Biden. What? It's not journalism. It's activism. Molly Hemingway, the great Molly Hemingway, tweeting this morning, Xing this morning, that her favorite thing about NPR's Empire Strikes Back attack on Uri Berliner that they're conducting right now is that it's authored by the same guy who wrote the piece about why NPR couldn't possibly do journalism on the Hunter Biden laptop. So, pretty funny. So that's where we are. Oh, Chris Cuomo had more questions for Uri Berliner last night. Cuomo wants to know, do you think NPR has changed through the years, from the bird noises to the anti-Trump stuff?
NPR, those laconic lefties, with that slow delivery and just feeding us all of this. Are you saying that's the truth, or are you saying it's something that has evolved? What do you want people to feel about NPR and what you feel about the media in general?
To feel? What a weird question. What do you want them to know? Forget feel. What do you want them to feel?
I think it's evolved. I've been at NPR a long time, 25 years. You could say I'm a lifer. And it's a place I've always loved working. But when I started, there was a liberal orientation, but I think we were more guided by curiosity, open-mindedness. You talked about policy. We were kind of nerdy and really like to dig into things and understand the complexity of things. I think that's evolved over the years into a much narrower kind of niche thinking, a group think that's really clustered around very selective progressive views that don't allow enough air, enough spaciousness to consider all kinds of perspectives.
Enough air. I think that's an understatement. They don't allow enough air. It's completely suffocating. You won't survive a segment. I think Chris Plant should do an entire segment, maybe even an entire show if he's feeling gutsy, in NPR voice. He just whispers it. You think he could do it? You think Mark Levin could do that? You think this? All right, we'll start with Larry. Larry's game for anything. Larry, would you do an entire show where you just whisper your way through it? Hi, welcome to O'Connor Company. I'm Larry O'Connor, sitting alongside the fabulous Julie Gunlock. Today we'll be telling you about all of the news events and the traffic and weather. You'll be so excited as you listen to the rest of this program. Can he do it? I don't know. I don't know if he can. Yeah. So here's the other big takeaway from this story that I think probably deserves more emphasis, certainly than I've been giving it. I just want to make sure to say this. It's not just NPR. What this guy Uri Berliner is describing is his own experience inside his own newsroom at this taxpayer-funded propaganda machine. That's what he's describing. But what he's revealing is that this is what happened to all the newsrooms. This is what happened everywhere. They have been so overcome by this anti-Trump, and let's be more specific, anti-Trump voter animus, that there's no curiosity. The profession has become dangerously incurious, which is why, like, for instance, when Joe Biden stands up at a press conference and then he tells, like, an obvious lie, like he says something like, I'm the first guy to graduate from my family from college, or whatever he says, and it's, like, obviously not true. It's not just that people know it's not true, which some number of them do, but they don't care. They're not scrutinizing him for that. They're not, you know how your mind can enter sort of active thinking versus passive listening, where you could be paying attention to someone, and certainly, radio, this format, what I'm called to do, especially with the guests that we have, I'm trying to actively listen to them. I want to hear what they're saying. I want to respond in real time. I want to kind of break it down, detect if they're not saying something, right? That takes kind of just a little bit different mode than I might be in, say, later tonight with a drink in my hand. It's not going to be the same thing. But for these so-called journalists, so many of them have abandoned the active listening portion of their minds and said, well, what headline is going to help Democrats here? What do I get out of this event that's going to help Democrats? What should I focus on that'll help Democrats? What's going to hurt Republicans here? How do I characterize this story in a way that's damaging to Republicans and helpful to Democrats? For instance, the FISA story that I quoted to you today from the New York Times, where the very first sentence of the piece is right-wing Republicans stopped an attempt to extend a FISA surveillance, warrantless surveillance of American citizens. Really? You led with right wing? So you want to, and they don't mean that as like some sort of obviously objective measure of where you are on a political spectrum. That's not what they mean at all. When they say that, they mean that as a pejorative. They think fascists stop the government surveillance of American citizens today. Are you listening to yourselves as you describe this? That's the conclusion you came up with? You said we got to lead with right-wing Republicans? A group of Republicans voted against the continued warrantless surveillance of American citizens today. That's true. Why are you qualifying them? Why are you going out of your way to impugn them? And then, of course, they're like, because Trump told them to. So the implication is that Trump's an authoritarian, and when he snaps, government officials do whatever he says. That's what they want to, the impression they want you to leave you with. But wait a second. The story is about reining in the government. The story is about stopping tyranny. The story is about stopping abuses. No more spying on American citizens without a warrant. This is a victory for what they refer to as, quote, our democracy, for our constitutional republic. That's a big deal. And Trump is on the side of decency. He's not the authoritarian in this equation. There's no way you could arrive at that conclusion in a fair reading of that news. He's on the side of stopping the authoritarians and the tyrants. And yet the media find ways to spin these things. This is the way their minds operate now. And so when we talk about NPR as, oh man, look how NPR changed through the years. Yeah, all of these newsrooms did this. They all did. It became a very emotional thing for them. And it's been very destructive for the country. Nobody trusts these places. Nobody. On the campaign trail today, Donald Trump paid a visit to Georgia. He went to Chic-Fil-A, which is a great restaurant, really is. The left hates it, but can't get enough of it, that's a good business model. They're like, I hate Christians, but I love their chicken. Okay. Trump shows up and he says he wants to buy milkshakes for everybody. How often are you at Chick-fil-A and somebody orders 30 milkshakes?
So can I have 30 milkshakes? And also some chicken. And we're going to take care of the customers. Is business good? You're making a lot of money? Everyone's getting rich, right?
The whole staff assembled right behind the counter. He goes, business good? Yes, they all say in unison. Making a lot of money? Yes. We're getting rich? Yes. They were excited to see him. In fact, one of the staffers there was so pumped to meet Trump. She said, I don't care what the media tells you, Mr. Trump. We support you.
So I don't care what the media tells you, Mr. Trump. We support you. We support you, man. Okay, 4 p.m. We're here 4 p.m.
Come here, let me give you a hug.
Let me give you a hug, he says. People taking pictures. And then in classic Trump fashion, he starts telling people it's a great franchise. I happen to know the owner. He doesn't mean of the specific franchise. He means literally the owner of the entire company.
So we'll order 30 milkshakes. We'll give them out to the people, and we'll take some for ourselves, okay? Good. Thank you very much, everybody. Hello.
This has got a great American franchise, Chick-fil-A.
It is. It's a great franchise. The owner is a great man who is a member of one of my clubs, and he's fantastic. And, yeah, they do very well. They're closed on Sunday.
The Lord's Chicken.
That's the Lord's Chicken. You're right.
That's the Lord's Chicken. I remember that from CCD. Lord's Chicken. This Chick-fil-A. Too funny. Too funny. So that's what good retail politics look like. Just in case you were wondering, Biden campaign. Try that. Biden looking at his note cards. Who do I call on now? What's my name? The great one, Mark Levin, is up next on the legendary WMAL.